a lot of people's mind, which is electric vehicles. How is that changing the industry, and how is it impacting you as far as your cost for maintenance and what it's going to take to keep these machines on the road? So, check out part 3 of our interview with Jay Goninen. How about how's EVs affecting this? Because now you're taking a gas motor and you're replacing it with an electric motor and a battery. How's that going to change the industry?
It's definitely going to have an impact. It's still, if you look at EV adoption rates and you take California out of the mix, it's still a slow roll for EV adoption. You are seeing more Teslas and more Rivians on the road, but it's going to take some time to get to where it's fully EV. I still think the government's standards for that are very, very ambitious, especially given that we can't support the grid that we have right now. But
that's a longer discussion.
Yeah. But the fact of the matter is, it is changing, right? And we are seeing a shift. With the exception, if anybody ever listens, Toyota, their CEO has such a great take on this. They're all in on hybrid. They're not in on EV at all. They're basically saying we're not going to do EV. We're sticking with hybrid. And I actually think it's a more sustainable model moving forward. But the EVs that are out there, one, if you've ever driven one, if anybody's ever driven a Tesla, a blast to drive. It's a different experience because it's very quiet and you hear that kind of weird humming. But they are super fast, a lot of fun to drive. And the technology behind them is insane. I think the new Ford Lightning has over 200 million lines of code, I heard.
Wow.
So it's a different type of repair. They still need to be fixed. Now, what you'll see is it's not so much maintenance items as it is repair items. So like the repair, like a general repair order, if you go to a shop, you could expect to say on average, and this isn't across the country, this is just maybe in a specific area, but say the average repair order when you go to take your car in is $400. In EV, the average repair order is $1,800.
Ooh.
So it's, again, when we talk about the theme of it getting more expensive to get your vehicle fixed, you're going to see that with the EV side. It's not going to be as much maintenance items as it is true breakdown diagnostic items. And there are some really cool things that you can do. You know, you can diagnose over the airwaves. Tesla's doing that as we speak. But the fact of the matter is you still have to fix it, and the batteries will still have to be changed. And there's all kinds of different things that can go wrong with them. And being able to understand that when you're buying an EV, that it's just a different experience altogether. And same with the shop end. They have to understand that this is just it's a different world, and might move to more of that lab type of shop feel and look. But the fact of the matter is there's just always going to be work at some capacity.
Agreed. Rich, you look like you're going to say something.
Well, I think you beat me to the EV question. I was ready with that one. It was right on the tip of my tongue. But yeah, I've listened to people over the years too, like back when the Prius came out, and it was the first, next big thing, right? And then everybody figured out a few years later that it was $5,000 to change out the battery in a Prius, and that was a hybrid at the time. So you're resonating exactly with the things that that I've already kind of thought about, that, this is the way that it's going to go. And also very interesting that's, like you said, it's going to lead to a more trained, a more specialized tech, and EV is just going to add to the complication. But gas is it's going to be here for a long time. So I'm really interested in what you're doing, though, more so on the personnel side, because I think the other thing that was going through my mind is I've got a 16-year-old, and I'm trying to decide, should you go and do the $250,000 college education and not and go work at McDonald's when you graduate, or or should you look into a technical type of job, a equipment maintenance, electrician, plumbing. Is that something that, I know you grew up in the automotive industry, but is your platform, kind of bringing you back to that, is your platform something that you could see going down into other technical areas as well. So maybe that's really my question, is tell me a little bit more about the platform.
I think there's potential there. We still have so much room to grow within the niche that we've got right now that I think we'll stick there. And I did want to hit on your point of that young person that's looking at college versus tech school. And I'll never bash college just because if I always say, like, if I have a heart attack, I want to make sure that the doctor that's cutting me open actually knows what they're doing, right? So I think it's very, very important. The one thing I'll say, and I think this is where students of this generation, like your 16-year-old, have gotten much, much better. And I do give parents credit for this, is you're actually starting to look at ROI on education. And so you're not just signing up for that liberal arts degree just to check the box as much anymore. You're actually knowing what you're going to do with that degree. And I think so many of us over the course of our careers have worked with people that they went to a 4-year school. They're working in an occupation that has nothing to do with what their degree was, but they have that piece of paper. It doesn't make sense. And I think you might start to see maybe a few more students taking that gap year or two to try and figure out what it is that they like. But at the end of the day, I think it's, for you parents that are out there, and even if there's kids listening, actually look at the ROI on it. Like, it doesn't take long to understand what your return on investment is going to be. And if you're going to spend 200 grand on an education that results in a $40,000 a year job, you might want to look at that a little differently. Right. And so,
Exactly.
I think I hope that our educators and administrations that are out there in middle schools and high schools are doing a better job at that conversation, because when I went to school, it was basically like, if you don't go to a 4-year school, you're scum, right?
Yeah,
You're not going to be
exactly
anything.
right.
And I have so many friends that are incredibly successful electricians, incredibly successful plumbers that have started their own businesses and are doing really, really well. Their return on investment of their education, and maybe they went through an apprenticeship type program, more of a formalized one as an adult, they're getting their ROI on that is insane. Whereas I've got friends that, have master's degrees and advanced degrees in different areas that aren't working in that industry, or they're not working in what they went to study for. And when I look at that, I just think it's such a waste. And so I hope, I don't want to downplay college. I just want you to go to college for the right thing. And if that's not automotive, that's perfectly fine. Or if that's not diesel, that's perfectly fine, because I don't want you to spend the money going to school for what we do either, if it's not something that you're going to pursue.
Right.
Well, I think you brought up a lot about parents getting more involved on that ROI, and with the trades, I know a lot of trade programs. You can get a company to sponsor you. They'll pay for your training. They'll pay for your apprenticeship. If you go the union route, for example, there's a whole structure there to help you gain experience and get you paid along the way. So you're actually making money while you're learning your job. You kind of hit on it a little bit in the automotive industry, where now some companies are offering tool credit and stuff like that. But have you seen it to the point now where maybe some of these either dealerships or tech shops are actually going as far as saying, look, we'll pay for your education and you'll come work here after you're done, and you won't have any debt? Are you seeing any of that yet?
A lot more on the trucking side, and I think the automotive side is going to follow. And there's an example in our backyard here in Wisconsin that is doing this as we speak. So Truck Country is I've got some really good friends within Truck Country. Started not too far away from where you and I grew up, Dan. I mean, it's
Yep.
down the road, but they've gotten gigantic, right? They have dealerships all over the Midwest, and they have actually started their own school in Dubuque. They actually have one in Dubuque and one in Indianapolis, where they're going into high schools and say, hey, listen, not only are you not going to pay for your school, we're going to pay you to come to our school. So that kid comes out and gets that Freightliner training or whatever that factory specific training is, and they're getting paid to be there to learn. So, I mean, not only are they not paying for their school, they're getting paid to even be there.
That I think that's going to be the future of all this, because as we hear about more kids graduating with those 4-year degrees, that, as you point out, $40,000 to $50,000 a year jobs with $200,000 in debt that, in most cases, these kids are never going to pay back the way it's structured. Um, I think we're going to see a lot more of that in all sorts of trade industries. It's just going to continue.
Oh, I think, I mean, I've got friends that are pharmacists that hate being pharmacists, but you're going to be a pharmacist for the rest of your life because you have the student loan debt
Yeah,
that's
you can't afford it.
equivalent of a house payment, right?
Yep.
So, I think, again, it's just truly knowing, and we've all been there. Like when you're a kid and you look at the jobs and what they pay, like I'll do whatever it takes to make that kind of money. And then when you're in it every day, you're like, yeah, I don't love this as much as I thought I did.
Yeah, I think back in, when all of us went to college many years ago, it was a lot different. The cost was much lower. I know I changed my major probably 3 or 4 different times, but at the same point, you could kind of get away with that to some degree. There was a little bit of learning curve actually while you were going to school, but now there's such a push, to get you out in that 4 to 5 years, and the cost has grown exponentially. I mean, that's the kicker for me. Times have changed so much. It didn't matter what you graduated in, you could use that degree for something.
Yes.
Now, because
Yes.
the cost is so extremely high and markets are looking for more specialized people, that's what's making it more difficult to justify everybody going to a 4-year degree. And that's, I got young kids. I know you got young kids. Rich, you were talking about just a minute ago. I think that's what us as parents are looking at now is, does the prestige of having a bachelor's degree, which actually isn't that prestigious anymore, it's now MBA or something higher if you're going that route, does that really make sense? And I think we're all kind of agreeing that in certain cases, yes, if you know where you're going and you know what you're going to do, that's fine. But there's a lot of other opportunities out there that we should be aware about.
Yeah. And I look my own family, right? Like I went to tech school, I went to trade school. My brother went to the University of Wisconsin as a really, really successful financial advisor. And I just think if we can get it through to the school counselors that there is more than one path and that it's okay to go down whichever path is the best fit for you, you'll be better off. And one of the examples I use is one of my best friends went to UW Platteville to start off, was going to be an engineer, hated sitting behind a desk, ended up getting up and leaving after his first year and going into an electrician apprenticeship program, and has been highly successful off of that. So I do think it's just truly understanding who you are. And I think the parents can do a lot of good in guiding their young kids on what direction to go. And I know those teenagers probably don't want to hear what their parents have to say a lot of times, but I think having
I
that,
can answer that one for you.
having that good honest conversation with them, I think goes a long way.
Thanks again for checking out part 3 of our interview with Jay Goninen. Part 4 is coming up very soon. Be sure to check out the final installment.